Thanks, Mark.
Well,
Welcome everyone. This is my great honor to host a live stream at Mark Nepo's blog at Patheos, Field Notes on Living. I'm Kate Sheehan Roach from Patheos. I edit the spirituality channel there, and it's just such a great honor to be with Mark Nepo tonight. He's blogging with us at Patheos, but he has so many fantastic books and so much going on. I'd love to just read a little bit of an introduction that I have here, because there's just so much. But first of all, I just have to say, Mark, getting to meet him is meeting the person you've read his words in the book. Just that same wisdom and warmth that comes out of his books that's the guy. He's right here. So I just recognize that this deep wisdom that he so eloquently shares with us comes from his experience surviving cancer twice, and these diagnoses have given him a perspective that he shares with others in such a way that he's just, all I can say is this man has seen the light, and he is shining it through his books and through his workshops and through his poetry and his meetings with others in such a way that is just brightening the world, making the world a brighter place. He's a beautiful writer, and as I said, a poet and a storyteller. Mark has actually been called one of the finest spiritual guides of our time. That's a perfect quote. I love the word guide to describe Mark, because he doesn't try to impart his own wisdom on us. Instead, he guides us into our own wisdom and our own experiences by coming alongside us as this wisdom poet that shows us to look at our own lives differently. I myself received Mark's book, The Book of Awakening, as a gift. Gosh, it might be about a decade ago. But it was during a time in my life when I was inconsolable. I was in grief. I was really, nothing could bring me solace except that book. And that changed my life. That was a while back. And in the meanwhile, Mark has written 17 amazing books before and after that time. He has recorded 13 audio projects. And he's given many, many workshops, several of which I've been very blessed to attend. So I encourage you all to look into Mark's books and attend his workshops. You won't be disappointed. Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us live.
Oh, thank you for that kind introduction. It's wonderful to be with you to explore this, and welcome to everyone who's joining us.
Oh, thanks, Mark. Yeah, I hope all the technology is smooth. We should be toggling back and forth by voice activation here on Google+. And you know, this is the next best thing to live, but if you really want to get together with Mark Nepo, you've got to see him in person. So he's traveling a lot to make that possible. Coming to New York, I'm in Philadelphia. Mark's in Kalamazoo right now, but tomorrow, is it, Mark? You're hopping on a plane?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, you'll be in New York City at the ABC Carpet and Home, let's see, celebrating your new book, giving a reading at 7 to 8:30 p.m., September 8th. That's going to be right in smack in Manhattan, right? Union Square, New York City. And then from there, you're heading to Charleston, South Carolina, September 16th through the 18th. That'll be a weekend retreat and also a celebration of the book, The One Life We're Given. And then you're still traveling off to Seattle, September 24th to 25th, in an event sponsored by your publisher, Sounds True. That'll be another big event in, let's see, you're at the Seattle Town Hall. So what a busy month you've got ahead of you, Mark.
Yeah, it kind of goes in spurts. You know, there's times when I'm home a lot, and then all of a sudden it's a lot of travel. But it's wonderful. I love being with folks and exploring these things together, like we're doing tonight.
Yeah. Well, it strikes me that your life is quite a mix between solitude and writing, where you must go off on your own you're a prolific writer. This doesn't happen if you don't take some time away, especially with your spiritual depth. So how do you balance, do you take a certain number of months to write and a certain number of months to travel, or is it weeks, or how do you handle that?
Well, I think this actually, and everything that for me it happens to be writing, but this really raises an archetype for everyone, and that we're all trying to balance and inhabit the rhythm between solitude and community. And we need both. We've always needed both. When I was younger, I used to think when I was like a teenager that there was something wrong with me you know, I really wanted to be with other people. And then as soon as I would get with like other people and be like at a party or something, then I couldn't wait to be alone. And when I was alone, I couldn't wait to be. And I said, God, what's wrong with me? And then I realized, as you know, as time went on, it's the way like a dolphin breaks surface and then goes back in the deep, and breaks surface, then goes back in the deep. And the thing about dolphins and whales is, you know, they live in the deep, but they're air breathers. They can't stay in the deep. They have to break surface and they have to return to the deep. And in this, they're great teachers for us. And so everybody has to find their rhythm between, because it's in solitude that we get our direct experience of life, of mystery, of whatever you want to call what's larger than you. And then, you know, when we break surface, we come into the world of relationship and belonging and connection. And, you know, of course, each of these has their shadow as well as their gifts. If we're only by ourselves, you know, if I'm only limited to my own opinions, God help me, you know, and then you're only listening to yourself. And this is where self-honesty is so important. But the shadow of community is that at some point, that freshness of direct living, well, you know, all of us are tempted to give it away to belong. You know, we'll give ourselves away to be accepted. And so there is this rhythm and this challenge. You know, for me in my travel and my writing, I try to keep that rhythm of being home and being in the deep, and then coming out and being authentically with others in circles and retreats and readings and keynotes and things around the country. So it's a wonderful way to listen both inwardly and outwardly.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Mark. I love your imagery. I just, it's amazing to me how that just rolls off your tongue, these visuals that help us really grasp the idea of, you know, breaking the surface and then diving back down. But what I really take from that, Mark, is that we don't need to apologize either way. And that's the liberating element to this, that, you know, like you said, as a teenager, you felt wrong one way or the other. Tell us about how, you know, with maturity, you've grown into someone who's comfortable in your own skin, as opposed to a teenager who's apologizing for feeling one way or the other.
Well, I think this is a lifelong practice, and I'm still learning. And I love what you said in the beginning, because I do believe, you know, we're just comparing notes. Whatever I share is an example and not an instruction.
What did Ram Dass said? We're all just walking each other home.
Well, I love that. We're all just walking each other home. And, you know, I'm 65 now, and I think it took me till my late 40s even to realize that I needed to put my effort in being authentic and real over trying to be good. And this made a huge difference in my maturing. And because I think what maturing means in a very daily way is to try, and I emphasize try because nobody does it all the time, but to try to be who we are everywhere. Everywhere. You know, we start out being who we are moment by moment in our own solitude, and then maybe with a trusted other. You know, Cicero said that, you know, a friend is a second self. And I love that, where, you know, when you can be with someone, a friend or a partner or a family member, and you actually, it's like being by yourself, then that's the comfort of truly accepting each other and being who you are. And then we try it out. And then, you know, but I think the goal is to be who we are. Now, for me, because this is my calling, I feel very natural in myself when I'm doing this with you or being in front of people, and whether it's a large group or a small group. And my challenge is to be who I am, you know, when I come home and I go to the pharmacy and the pharmacist is, you know, really, you know, rude and, you know, or, you know, not pleasant, or at the gas station or in the supermarket, or, you know, so my challenge is to be who I am, you is for me. And I think that why I say the effort to be real over being good is because I think if I make the attempt to be real, to be authentic, by human nature, we will be good. But if I make the effort to be good, it's not always a certainty that I'll be real.
How do your motives come into play there?
Oh, I think this is, there's a real dance that I think we have to do. One of the lines in the Book of Awakening is that, one of the ways to joy is to be easily pleased. And the Buddhists have a wonderful, whole kind of view about preferences, that we should minimize our preferences, what comes our way. There we are.
A copy. Whoops, it's upside down. Copy. It's coming out upside down on the screen. How strange.
Oh, there you go. It looks up right side up to me.
Okay, good. That's right. That's really strange. Yeah, some people might be familiar with this, and we have some comments and questions that pertain to the Book of Awakening, New York Times #1 bestseller that a lot of people are familiar with. And if you did enjoy that book, just brace yourself for the one life we're given, because it really it picks up where Book of Awakening leaves off. And this is this year's publication, and I'd love to hear more about, Mark. I mean, you can tell us best how these books support one another.
Well, I think in the Book of Awakening, which I wrote, God, it was back in 6 or 7 that I started it. And it took about 3.5 years to write. And, I was, not too far out of my cancer journey. And I also have dear loved ones who have been in recovery from addictions, alcoholism. And so, I was seeing day books everywhere. Mm-hmm. And it was really striking to me that they were used. They were in cars, they were in laundry rooms, they were beat up, they were, they were everywhere. And it occurred to me, and my wife Susan also at the time had also encouraged me, like, boy, if you could fill that form, it might be really helpful, be useful. And so,
I'll vouch for you there.
Oh, thank you. And I felt that, if I could fill it with small doses of what matters, then it might be helpful. And so, all of my work in many different forms, but how, all these years later, the one life we're given is also, I feel like it's evolving that really potent form of story and metaphor wrapped around small doses of what matter. And, it's interesting because the books over all these years, really essentially for me, it's like I take a bucket from the shore to the mystical ocean, and each bucket is a book. And I scoop whatever that bucket will fill, and that's the book. And then I go back and scoop the next one. And, so they're all really of the same water. They're all really of the same water. And I just inquire into them differently based on the challenges that I find myself in. And here, the subtitle of this is Finding the Wisdom That Waits in Your Heart. And, I had a really good friend as I was finishing the book said, well, in your heart, then why do you have to find it? Or why is it, And for me, it's that what I'm really discovering here is that we're given one life, one precious life. And all the traditions speak about this differently, but the wisdom that waits in our heart is dormant. And it doesn't show itself until we let what is in out and let what is out in. Until we are an open inlet between the inner world and the outer world.
I need you to say that again, Mark. That is profound. I'm going to be like Oprah and make you say it again.
Well, the one life we're given is so precious, and that the wisdom that waits in our heart and our gifts, they are dormant and they don't really show themselves or come alive And we don't really come alive until we let what is in out and let what is out in. You know, as I breathe, and we all know this is a great way to understand this. The same air that's in my lungs fills the sky. The same air that you breathe fills the sky. So now if we're together and you breathe and I breathe, now we have the sky and each other inside us. Once we open up, everything moves through us. And it's hard to tell what is you and what is me. And that's the beauty of living a life of authenticity and care. Because we both, it's a paradox, we become more who we are, and at the same time, the distinction between us, the more we love, starts to evaporate. You know, when I was going through my cancer journey, I was blessed to have so many people help me from all traditions, and it takes a toll on people to care for others who are suffering. It creates a tandem suffering. And the reward for that is this incredible intimacy, not only with each other, but ourselves and with life. And there were times in the depth of my journey that we weren't sure who was ill and who was well, because we were so in it together.
Wow. I have to share a question because you just made me think of this. We've got some questions from our viewers, and this one actually came in a day or two ago, and it just dovetails beautifully with what you're saying. We had an email come that said, "I have seen cancer/serious illness transform family and friends, but I've never been gravely ill. Can someone who has never had a brush with death begin to understand what it's like?"
Yes, absolutely. So let's back up and for a second. Well, I appreciate that question, because often, you know, we tend, you know, this kind of, I think, false myth that you have to suffer to be an artist, or you have to go through something, you know, disastrous to wake up your life. Well, that's one way, but that's not the only way. And the truth is that I talk about cancer because that's what opened me. But cancer is just a disease. We don't need to deify the disease. What is opened in us is always more important than what opens us. What is opened in us is always more important than what opens us. And sometimes, understandably, we get stuck on what has opened us, especially if it is unfair or unjust, or comes from betrayal or cruelty. And that, you know, deserves attention, but sometimes we miss what has been opened in us.
Absolutely.
Which is always more important. So, you know, so there are kind of two basic ways that human beings grow. And why DNA? Well, two ways spiritually, two kind of spiritual DNA, or X and Y, is that we willfully shed what gets in the way, or we're broken open. And like DNA, it's usually a combination of both. And we struggle to willfully shed. But we don't have to worry, because if we resist that, we will be broken open. And I'm not, you know, advocating that. It's more like describing spiritual physics, like gravity. It just happens. So our challenge is that when we are awakened by being broken open, how to willfully keep that part of us open. So absolutely, you know, it could have been for me, it was cancer that opened me or awakened me, but it could have been joy or surprise or wonder. So, you know, it's important to note that the word to suffer literally means to feel keenly.
I have to share a comment, another one here. It was not really a question, but a comment, where a reader said, "I read your blog on the power of holding a couple of months ago. It has helped me cope with an impending loss. Thank you, Mark." Do you remember that blog on the power of holding?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Will you share with the listeners this is amazing, because you're basically, you know, being affirmed, and by sharing that, somebody was able to internalize that. And
That story is in the new book. It's a small chapter in the new book, and it comes from, I have a dear friend, Rich Frankel, and another dear friend, Tom Inouye, and the two of them are leaders in the field of relationship-centered care. And they shared that story with me, and I'll tell you that story, from listenings that they were doing with doctors in a clinic of self-care for these doctors at the Cleveland Clinic. And so they were asking them, how have you grown from being with a patient? And a rheumatologist told this story, and she had a young woman, 21, who was dying of cancer. And they had done everything they could, and they were running out of treatment options. And she came in one day, and to see that the blinds were drawn in the room, it was dark. She was curled up in the bed, and there was just a great sadness in the room, and her mother and her sister were sitting there. Rheumatologist, skilled, schooled. She had run out of all of the skills and schooling that she had. And her heart told her to get in bed and hold this woman. Mm. And so she climbed in bed with her patient and held her. And after a while, she got out of bed. And that refreshed the soul of this woman, so that she asked her mother to open the blinds to get her juice. And no, it didn't prevent her from dying, but it helped her live in the face of dying. And so the power of holding, which is original medicine. There are two things that seem so obvious that we take for granted, and I take for granted. We all do, because no one can stay awake all the time. We're human. We're human. And so, but holding and listening is medicines. And all you need is an open heart and the courage to hold and listen.
Well, and the root word of courage is heart. So it's that's what I see repeatedly. And I'd love to take this moment to invite you to read. That was a beautiful story. There are dozens and dozens like that here. Do you have any preferences or any choices you'd like to read to us tonight, Mark?
Yeah, let me read this one. This is a story, and I know people often ask, so if you already have the book, this is on page 87. This is a little story about a widower who goes and seeks help from an old woman sage. A troubled widower made his way to ask a wise old woman about his troubles. She received him, and they walked along a stream. She could see the pain in his face. He began to tremble as he asked, "What's the point? Is there any meaning to life?" She invited him to sit on a large stone near the stream. She took a long branch and swirled it in the water, then replied, "Well, it all depends on what it means to you to be alive." In his sorrow, the man dropped his shoulders, and the old woman gave him the branch. "Go on," she said. Water. As he poked the branch in the running stream, there was something comforting about feeling the movement of the water in his hand through the branch. She touched his hand and said, "You see that you can feel the water without putting your hand in the water. This is what meaning feels like." The man grew tender, but still seemed puzzled. She said, "Close your eyes and feel your wife now gone, that you can feel her in your heart without being able to touch her. How meaning saves us." The widower began to cry. The old woman put her arm around him and said, "No one knows how to live or how to die. We only know how to love and how to lose, and how to pick up branches of meaning along the way."
Beautiful. Wow. I'd like to invite people out there to comment, we're all just breathless when you take these images and bring them meaning. It's I know it's profound. I have several questions from the blog that might.
Well, let me just hold on a question,
Sure.
because I wanted to share something here, and that is, so, and I share this because it's not just about writing. I retrieved that story. I didn't author it. So I didn't know. I mean, of course, the heart of that story is the lesson from the branch and the water and feeling the water through the branch. All I started with was, I wasn't like, oh, let me create a story that will offer that insight. I didn't know that before I wrote. I knew I had an image of a man in grief seeking help. Followed that conversation, the reward for letting my heart listen, holding and listening, listen, conversation, heard that insight. And whether you're right or not, this is an example of how to listen in your daily experience. And then we'll go to the question you have. That, you know, in the Hindu tradition, there is a term Upa Guru, U-P-A-G-U-R-U, and it means the teacher that is next to you at this moment. And there's always a teacher next to you at this moment. There are 1,000 teachers. And that's how if we listen with our heart and we can return to being present, we will always find a teacher nearby.
Well, that just made me switch which one I'm going to do, because this one reminded me of, here we go. This came in on the blog. It says, I am a devout Catholic who has never really had any exposure to other religions. Your Book of Awakening introduced me to the idea that other religions are true, and it kind of freaked me out. How can I believe in more than one religion without losing my faith?
Well, thank you to that person for your courage in listening and being open and in asking this question. And so, again, like we're saying, I don't have an answer. Let me speak to it from my own experience and how I come to be a student of all paths and speak to this a little bit. So, you know, I was raised Jewish. And my parents were actually kind of cultural Jews who were atheists. And they had a mystical poet for a son. So that, you know, they didn't know what to do with me, and I didn't know what to do with them. And because I've always believed in God, and in whatever name you give to that. And I think if you believe in anything larger than yourself, you're a mystic. What's larger than us goes by many names, and they all coexist. So as we talk about this, and it's one of my favorite things to talk about, I want to share that when I went into my cancer journey, as I mentioned, I was blessed to have people from all traditions offer me help. And so first off, during it, you know, like for instance, I had a Catholic priest who was a friend who wanted to lay hands on me. Well, we didn't have a theological discussion. I said, thank you. Where, when, do it as often as you want. So when we're that close to life and death, we stop what we think are these important distinctions, and we just say, help me, thank you. Yes. And so I wasn't, and I am still not wise enough, now that I'm well, to know what worked and what didn't. And I know that God challenged me to believe in everything. And ever since, almost 30 years ago, I have been a student of all paths. And I have been devoted in my writing and teaching to revealing what I believe is the common center of all paths, and lifting up the unique gifts of each. So I think what's important is that at the center, what we know as God, or what we call as Dharma, or what quantum physicists call as the physics of the universe, whatever name we give to it, it's really nameless at the center. And the important thing is that we meet there. And so I liken this, and I'll give just one, more metaphor here as we speak to this question, and that is of spring. Now, we know that in nature there are thousands of insects and birds, and they all are born with a yearning and a compulsion to pollinate a specific fruit, plant, flower, or tree. And we need all of them, or we wouldn't have spring. So imagine if the bees were fundamentalists and said to everyone else, doesn't matter fundamentalist what.
Fundamentalist bees.
Fundamentalists. And imagine they said to everyone else in the nature kingdom, no, it's our way the only way, and we're all going to do it this way. We wouldn't have spring. And I think that with the incredible diversity of life on Earth, each of us is born with a different part of divinity and a different piece of the world to pollinate. And so we don't lose our faith. We need as many paths of faith as possible to pollinate the human spring.
Beautiful. Another great image. Well, that leads to another post here where somebody says, this is probably a short one, but interesting. She just says, does being a poet help you write better prose? You think like a poet, you speak like a poet, you are the poet man, but how does that affect this is a writing question, how does being a poet affect the prose you write?
Well, I think, my sense of poetry has changed through the years. So to me, poetry is not about the manipulation of language. Poetry is the unexpected utterance of the soul that shows up unexpectedly to renew us. The words are the trail of that authenticity. So for me, all of my writing, though my publishers call it prose or poetry or memoir or this or that, for me, it's all poetry. And I don't, whether it's, quote, fiction or nonfiction, whatever it might be, I don't go to the page unless it is speaking through my soul. Whether I'm speaking about somebody's life that I've never known or about my own life. And so what helps me is the fact that when I am, and again, like solitude and community, we need both. We need to write about our own lives in order to clean the lens of our heart and mind and eye so that we can inhabit other lives and learn from them. And then we go back and clean the window of our heart and mind and eye again. And there's a rhythm between that. And trusting. So for me, at this point in my life, and this in no way diminishes that I know there are people who are just like exquisite masters in each form. And you can just devote yourself for a lifetime to one form, whether it's the novel or poetry or prose, whatever. For me, I have been led to a place where all the genres are tools in a toolbox. So my prose, my quote nonfiction, as you well know, if I need to do research, it can be scholarly. If I need to tell a story, I listen for a story. If I talk about my life, it's memoir. If I need to move into metaphor, I move into metaphor. And I just trust that my authenticity will weave them all together.
So it's similar to your experience and your approach with the world's religions.
Yes.
It seems identical, really, just that these are tools by which we go deeper in our belief or in our expression or in our just living. I've never thought of it that way, but just the fact that those two questions, seemingly, separate questions, really led to the same answer.
Well, and ultimately, I believe that everyone alive, this is archetypal, Everyone alive will be given the opportunity to be dropped into the depth of life. That may come through suffering, or it may come through joy, or love, or surprise, or wonder, or disorientation. It can come any way. But once we are thrown into the depth of life, I think a deeper part of the spiritual journey begins, because we are forced to break our self-reference. And now a conversation begins about, and this is really the spiritual conversation. What kind of part am I in what kind of whole, W-H-O-L-E? How do I relate to everything that is not me? How do I stay who I am and relate to all that is not me? And every world religion, every tradition offers us support and ways to live in that relationship. And what I urge individuals, seekers, and interestingly, the word saint comes from the Sanskrit sant, S-A-N-T, which simply means truth seeker. So everyone in their authenticity is a saint. I encourage people to string together your own mosaic from all the traditions of things that work for you, of things that are real to you, of things that speak to you.
That's so important for us to hear, Mark, because we, you know, I know I'm not the only one who sits here and says, wow, this person is on such a, a deep wavelength. I'm just trying to get the garbage taken out and laundry done, and the kids need to go to school and they don't have the right shoes or whatever it is, or just trying to make a buck, most of the time, and sometimes it feels far away to be able to live in these metaphors. But I have a quote that somebody pulled out of your book, from the One Life We're Given. I think it's early on in the book. Also, it says, regardless of what you do for a living, the only important vocation is listening to the heart when it says, this is vital, this is alive, this can't be lost. Now, so I'm thinking of, the engineer, or the mathematician, or the person who works in the Walmart,
So every one of us, and first off, let me just say, very quite honestly, that no matter how much we learn, no matter what we know, nothing exempts us from the journey of living in a body and time on earth. So, here, this is garbage night here, and when we're done, I'll have to take the garbage down to the curb, and if I trip or it spills, for everything we talk about, no matter how eloquent, thank you, I might seem, I'll trip, I'll swear, I'll, maybe forget what we've talked about and have to relearn it all over again. At first that seems frustrating, but isn't that beautiful? Isn't that beautiful? So the purpose of wisdom is not to shortcut our incarnation, but to support us, because everyone who's ever lived does it all over again. We do it all over again, sometimes in one life. And so what we're talking about, and I'm glad you raise all of this, is we all are challenged to develop a personal practice of survival and surviving and thriving. So,
that was a question coming up where somebody asked what your personal practice is. Like, how do you do this, Mark Nepo?
Oh, well, I know all these things because I have violated them so often. So I'm very intimate with all of this, and with being human. Surviving and thriving. So we have to survive, which involves managing risk in the outer world. But if all you do is survive and you don't thrive, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
And if you thrive and you don't manage risk, if we were having this conversation while walking on the street in Philadelphia where you live, and we weren't looking, we could get hit by a truck. Then the journey's over. That is managing risk. Now, in the inner world, we need to enhance risk. because that's the only way we thrive. And so each of us has to develop our personal skills and balance of managing risk in the outer world and enhancing risk in the inner world. And it's not okay to just say, oh, well, I'm naturally a risk taker. I'm not really good at this outer stuff. Well, that's, if you're naturally good at one, you need to pay attention to the other, because it's like walking with two legs. You need both of them to work.
That leads to another question here. And it's phrased like Jerry Seinfeld here. It says, what's the deal with joy and sorrow balancing each other out?
Well, that's...
Picture Jerry Seinfeld saying that to you.
Yeah,
what's the deal, Mark? What's the deal with this joy and sorrow balancing each other out?
Well, I don't know for me if they balance each other out as if they are aspects of the deepest part of our being human. So we know, remember, to suffer means to feel keenly. Well, to know joy, you have to feel keenly too. So from the beginning of time, understandably, human beings have said, you know what, I really just want the nice stuff. You can have the bad stuff. All right? There are actually phrases go far as back into Babylonian times of ancient poems that say, you know, I don't want the difficult stuff. Let me have the good stuff only. But that's not the way life works. The resources of life appear in their wholeness. So this is the challenge. Take a glass of water. We all know, we learn at an early age, it's made out of hydrogen and oxygen. But I can't say to you, could I just have the hydrogen, please? Because if you could separate it, it would no longer be water, and it would no longer be quenching, and it would no longer keep me alive. Joy and sorrow are like the hydrogen and the oxygen. They are inextricably knit together. And you cannot love without losing. If you love, you will lose. You will know sorrow. But if you don't love, what's the point? And so we are thrown into being alive with no notes, no instructions, just each other. And we are challenged to feel keenly, because it's only through the strongest muscle we have, our heart, that we can take in the water of life, which is made of joy and sorrow, and it will be quenching and healing and full of resilience. And so I think that life has been made just hard enough that we need each other to ensure the journey of love. So try as we will, we can't escape sorrow, and thankfully we can't escape joy either.
Wow. That just needs a moment of silence, I think. That's so beautifully said and so very, very true. I wonder if now would be a good time for another reading. Do you have another part you'd like to read to us?
Oh, sure. Yeah, let me read this.
In case anybody's just joining, The One Life We're Given is Mark Nepo's latest book, Finding the Wisdom That Waits in Your Heart. And we are learning so much about how Mark came to write this book. So it's such a treat to hear him read from it.
Well, thank you. So this is in the beginning of the book, but I want to share it because of where our conversation has been. It's on page 3. Each person is born with a gift. Our call is to find and care for it. The ultimate purpose of the gift is to exercise the heart into inhabiting its aliveness. For the covenant of life is not just to stay alive, but to stay in our aliveness. And staying in aliveness depends on opening the heart and keeping it open. Our dreams, goals, and ambitions are all kindling, fuel for the heart to exercise its aliveness, to bring our gift into the world, to discover what matters. Like a match, like a wooden match that you light a stove with, or a fire, like a match, our light is revealed as our gift strikes against the needs of the world. Our light is revealed as our gift strikes against the needs of the world. So our gifts, like the light, we know when we hold up a match, that light is dormant in the tip of the match until it strikes against something. Likewise, all the traditions say that our gifts and our aliveness and our spirit, they're dormant like the light in that match. And it's only by engaging in the world, in the life of relationship between us, that it shows its light and warmth. So we drift in and out of knowing our aliveness. Pain, worry, fear, loss, all of these things can muffle and confuse us. But finding our gift and working it will bring us back alive. No matter if we're skillful or clumsy, if we play our gift well or awkwardly, or if we make great strides or fail. Aliveness is not a judge and a talent show. Aliveness shows itself in response to wholeheartedness, when we can say yes to life, work with what we're given, and stay in relationship to everything.
Wonderful, Mark. You just answered a question for me that I posed a couple of weeks ago. I was reminded of my great aunt, Kate, who was one of those people that was everybody's favorite. We all just loved her. And what was it about her? You know, I finally reached the point where I asked the question. She died about 15 years ago. You know, everybody misses her, but it was like, what was it about Aunt Kate? Why did we just all want to be with her? Why did she light up the world that way? And what you just described was my great Aunt Kate, my namesake. That's what she lived. And she wasn't somebody famous. She was, you know, she didn't win any Nobel Prizes, but let me tell you, she was one of the most amazing people to ever walk this earth because of she lived what you just said.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And you know, and I encourage anyone who's listening, this is how we practice. You know, you just brought in model of aliveness and heart. So I ask everyone who's listening, this is a great way to practice. Can you journal about, whether it's literally someone in your family or not, just someone you admire, could be a stranger or someone in history. Is there someone that you admire this in their heart? Why? I just would invite sometime in the next week to explore that, to have a conversation with yourself by bringing in a case study of a model of aliveness and heart.
That's one of the things I love about your book, Mark. At the end of each chapter, and they're short chapters, Mark gives a practice just like that in order for us to enter into it and come away with, you know, our own nuggets of truth. For me, it's a fast read. I could fly through this book, except that I keep stopping to write. I've basically written my own One Life I've Been Given while I'm reading Mark's One Life We've Been Given, because it's so inspirational. And I find I actually can write like Mark when I'm, you know, in that moment. I find things that I didn't know. I actually ended up writing a letter to my teenage daughter as she's getting ready to start her senior year of high school. And I thought, you know, this is her senior year of high school. I should write her a letter like that every week. This is what Mark Nepo's books have meant to me. They life-changing inspiration that isn't just head knowledge, isn't just, you know, something you hang on the wall. It's something that you actually give to your, you know, you can't hold on to it. You have to give it away. So that's that leads me to a question that I want to make sure I get to, because we're coming toward the end here. And here's one that came through. I'll shorten it up, but it was a person. What made me think of it was when you say to keep it, you have to give it away, is a 12-step slogan, I guess. And another thing is this idea of something larger than yourself that you mentioned. Somebody in the blog asked about how all of this pertains to addiction, and you, Mark, what is your take on addiction, is what he asked.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And first off, you know, I have people in my life who have struggled with addiction, and so I've been very close to people with addiction. I think anything can be addiction. You know, it's taken me many years to be in relationship to my creativity, because with not being in balance, my creativity can be an addiction. My oldest, dearest friend is a recovering alcoholic, and we helped save each other's lives because he hit bottom when I was going through cancer. And years later, we both have neuropathy. He from the extreme ends of alcoholism, and me from chemo. And we were sitting one day, several years after we'd both been through this, having lunch in the sun, and he looked at me, and out of silence, he said, I'm an alcoholic, but you're a makeaholic.
Wow.
And yeah, that so it's taken me years to be in right relationship to my creativity so that it doesn't consume me. So anything that is mistaken for life, any part, whatever it might be, it could be drinking, it could be sex, it could be shopping, it could be addicted technology, anything that is mistaken for life, which can't bring us alive, can become an addiction.
It's what the old Hebrew scriptures called idolatry, right? Isn't that the same idea? Like anything that we worship, whether it's money or work or success.
Yeah, and I think my understanding of addiction, Carl Jung talked about alcoholism as the right spiritual thirst and the wrong drink. So
never heard that before. Say that again.
Carl Jung spoke about alcoholism as the right spiritual thirst, but the wrong drink. And so I think that when we refuse this messy, magnificent journey of being human, no matter how hard it is, when we're not honest about our feelings, when we don't face what is ours to face, those things don't go away and they get bigger and bigger. And when we don't reach out when we're in deep pain or fear or worry or despair, then we reach for things to try to either fill up our emptiness, quiet our pain, calm our fear, or simply to numb us. And of course, they never do temporarily. And we start to fall into a dependency on whatever that might be. And I think that, it's very, very difficult. I have a lot of respect for anyone dealing with addiction. And I think that the humility for each of us to face ourselves and reach out. I think, the 12-step program is one of the remarkable community creations in, 500 years. And that the lessons in the 12-step program are remarkable for anyone, whether you're actually addicted or not. I think they're very healthy forms of community and self-care. So, there's a lot more to say about addiction and how difficult it is. I mean, that's why it's called addiction, how difficult it is to break out of it once we're in it. So I have a lot of compassion for anyone struggling with any one aspect that has gotten so out of proportion that it dominates a life. And, there's a small poem of mine that I offer here. It's called Practicing. That whether we're dealing with addiction or problems, sometimes we get so caught up in thinking and trying to figure it out and problem solve. And at a certain point, no amount of thinking will get us out of it. We just have to drop it, which takes tremendous courage, the stronger whatever it is. So the poem goes like this. It's very short. Practicing. As a man in his last breath drops all he is carrying, each breath is a little death that can set us free. As a man in his last breath drops all he is carrying, each breath is a little death that can set us free. And so I think whatever level of compulsion or addiction that we find ourselves in, is the first thing is self-compassion, but the courage to drop it and then to seek help.
It's beautiful, Mark. I have a book idea for you after that. I want you and your best friend to co-author, where I love that he sort of nailed you on being a something-aholic. You know, I love that we're all addicted to something, but what an amazing project that would be to co-author a book with your best friend. So I'll be looking for that one.
No, thank you.
Let me know when that one comes.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, there's just so much that we take from your writing, Mark, and I think, you know, what keeps coming up for me and what helped me, like I said, when I first started reading your work, is that there's a common thread of freedom. This idea of, you know, the liberation that comes from honesty and courage, you know, the things that make us want to go hide in the corner. That's not a free way to live, cowering in the closet, but the way you draw us out and call us into the heart, which is the place of courage. The French cœur is heart. What I experience is a real liberation with everything I've read. That you've got so many books. I've got piles of them here. That you come from many different angles, like you said, different tools, but arriving at the same destination. And for me, it's really been a freeing experience that makes me want to come back and read more. These are the kind of books you want at your bedside when you can't get to sleep at night because you're nervous about trying to host a live stream event and being afraid that the technology is going to go wrong. And I wouldn't have jinxed that any sooner than now. but you know, keep Mark Nepo's book by your bedside, and a man who has incredible heart and incredible courage will give you credible heart and credible courage to move forward and actually sleep like a baby, even though you don't trust your own technology.
Thank you for hosting this and all you've done to put this together. And I want to say to your last point, and we can move our way toward a close with this, but I have found in my life that courage only comes for me when I am afraid. You can't be, courage is required. I find my spirit requires courage of me exactly when I am afraid. And one of the rewards is that what I'm afraid of gets right-sized when I dare to be courageous. And one of my books is called Finding Inner Courage, one of my earlier books. And what gave me the way into that book is that courage, the actual original idiom of courage, meant to stand by one's core. And so whenever we're afraid, and I know when I've been afraid or in pain, whatever it might be, there's nowhere to go but where we are. And we can stand in our core, right where we are. Pain, even though we might be afraid, there is a certain foundation of being that starts to flow into us, that helps to right-size us. And so I just offer to anyone listening that your heart. The paradox about the heart is that when it's most sensitive is when it's strongest. And so it can feel unbearable, but the heart is the strongest muscle we have. And though it can break, it never lets us down.
That's beautiful, Mark. Thank you so much for sharing from your heart to our hearts. You're such a brilliant man, and it amazes me how you don't get trapped in that brilliant mind, because you bring it. We always talk about coming from our head down to our heart in spiritual practice, and clearly your practice is just that. So thank you. I really appreciate this time, and I hope all of the viewers will revisit this. This recording will be available at Field Notes on Living. It'll be available forever. You can come and listen to some more and comment. Let's get some conversation going on the blog where you can continue with some of these questions and engage with one another. This is a conversation that's just beginning. There's so much more to be said and so much more to be explored. And I hope you'll use this wonderful blog as a place to continue that. All right. Thanks again, Mark. Any final words to your
well, just thank you all for taking time to join us, and I just wish you so well and just aliveness, just following your aliveness. And thanks again, Kate. This was just wonderful time together.
Thank you, Mark. I wish I could come see you in New York. Mark Nepo will be in New York City tomorrow. He's getting on a plane. And then from there, he goes to Charleston, South Carolina the next weekend, and then to Seattle. So we will actually be offering, those of you who have signed up here on the blog, we'll be offering some free tickets to those events. And if you're not in those locations, we will give you a copy of, we'll do a drawing for a free copy of The One Life We're Given. So thank you, Mark, for writing this beautiful book and for sharing it with us tonight.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
All right, we'll sign off on that. Thank you so much. Good night.